Hi all. This is the first in a series of videos that are going to be looking at best practices in the different components of reading that were identified by the National Reading Panel in 2000, and those are phonemic awareness, phonics, fluency, vocabulary, and comprehension. We're going to be digging deeper into decoding, D, and comprehension, C, looking at what the research says and also what the research implies as to practice. We're going to start with phonological awareness and phonics, a chapter by Patricia Cunningham. And as I suggested, her chapter and this relatively brief video includes two major elements: the research in terms of what are evidence-based practices and those best practices in action. As a way of a brief review, what is phonological awareness? We'll recall it is the ability to pay attention to, identify, and reflect on various sound segments of speech. In other words, rhyme and alliteration are two frequently given examples. What is phonemic awareness? Well, it is under a subcategory of phonological awareness. And phonemic awareness refers to the ability to identify and reflect on, in other words, it's a metalinguistic skill, the smallest, and I've added distinctive units of sounds, individual phonemes. And they're not just any sound, but sounds of the language. And they're not just any small sound, because phonemes are not the smallest units. In fact, they are the smallest distinctive units. In other words, they are the smallest units that make a difference in meaning. And why is phonemic awareness so important in learning to read? And this is the key question that I want you to be able to answer. And that is because children need some level of phonemic awareness to understand and be able to take advantage of the fact that in an alphabetic writing system, which we've talked about, like English, letters represent sounds. Remember, they don't make sounds, but they represent sounds. So if you're going to be able to make this connection between graphemes, the letters, and phonemes, the sounds, you have to be able to distinguish the individual letters, a discrete unit. You also have to be able to distinguish and be aware of the individual speech sounds, the phonemes. And this ability to match in systematic ways alphabet letters and speech sounds is called the alphabetic principle. So why does it have to sometimes be taught and practiced? Why is it difficult for children to recognize individual speech sounds? They develop individual speech sounds. We know that because they develop the language within which they're growing up, and other languages as well. And you really only need phonemic awareness, that metalinguistic awareness, in reading. Obviously, little kids don't have phonemic awareness, they just pick it up. But in order to read, you have to take advantage of the alphabetic principle. You have to become consciously aware that there are these individual sounds in words. Why is it difficult? Because speech is a continuous stream of sound. Not only are individual sounds co-articulated, but words are strung together into sentences and sentences into phrases. We do not speak paying attention to the punctuation we use in writing. And secondly, the default here is meaning, not sound. So my favorite example is which word is longer? caterpillar or snake, and most children will say snake because it has the longer referent. When you're able to say caterpillar, then you're looking at the sounds of the language as an object of investigation separate from meaning. And that's not something that children naturally do. So despite the fact that it's challenging and difficult, why do we promote phonemic awareness? Well, we go back not only to sort of the logic of it, that in an alphabetic writing system you need to be able to systematically match sounds to letters, but there's also really overwhelming evidence and research findings that link phonemic awareness to early success in reading. And it's overwhelming, the evidence. So I would say it's one of those things that now we can say with a great deal of confidence that phonemic awareness is important in learning how to read. We also know that you can get better at phonemic awareness through instruction, through training, and that when you get better at phonemic awareness, guess what? Your reading also improves. Finally, even beyond that, we've been able to take a look through neuroscience at what happens neurologically when someone is given intensive reading intervention in word decoding. And these are the two hemispheres, left and right. Before the intervention, those little white dots are the portions of the brain that are being activated. And before intervention, this particular child had little activation in the left hemisphere and more activation in the right hemisphere. As it turns out, it appears that the right hemisphere is not as well suited to making those sound symbol correspondences as is the left hemisphere. And yet, after 8 weeks of an intensive intervention in this particular student, what happened was the brain was sort of rewired. There were different pathways and different connections which were made. And in fact, now after intervention, this MRI suggests that there is more activation in the left hemisphere, which seems to be better suited for decoding and making these kinds of sound symbol correspondences. Still activation in the right hemisphere, but perhaps not quite as much as before, and certainly what's most important is the activation in the temporal parietal areas of the left hemisphere. So not only is there empirical evidence, but now there seems to be physical evidence that intervention can make a difference. And this is explained in this slide. It's for this reason, really, that the Common Core State Standards include phonological awareness. In this slide, you can see that they're listed in kindergarten and first grade, so that by first grade, children are expected to segment spoken single-syllable words into their complete sequence of individual sounds. If that's phonological awareness and phonemic awareness, then what is phonics? Well, phonics is an instructional approach. Phonics is an instructional approach that takes advantage of this systematic relationship, takes advantage and is really dependent upon a student having phonemic awareness. And it is learning and teaching about, through instruction, the relationship between letters and sounds. Once again, what we call the alphabetic principle. So the question is, okay, if phonics is important, and it wasn't always thought to be important, the reading wars, which you may or may not have heard of, were wars between, quote unquote, different thoughts about how to teach beginning reading. There was a sight word method back in the 50s and 60s, and that was in contrast to phonics instruction, which came more into the vogue a little bit later. Remember Jeannie Shaw from week 1, and she was a proponent of phonics instruction. And then those kinds of different fields, different ideas different schools of thought about early reading shifted again in the 1990s, and we had whole language, which was reading from trade books, getting the gestalt of reading, really focusing on comprehension from the very beginning, with the idea that kids would pick up the decoding skill as they went along, and that reading was really propelled through meaning. And so then it was this give and take between whole language and phonics. After the National Reading Panel in 2000, its report, there has been fairly consistent agreement on the importance of phonics instruction. The question kind of becomes, well, what kind of phonics instruction is there? Because there are many different kinds of phonics instruction. There's what's called synthetic phonics instruction, which really is what we've been talking about somewhat in this course, and that is learning that sounds are represented and associated with letters, and then blending these letters together into words. Analytic phonics instruction, which tends to take more initial sounds and then using the context, beginning to make hypotheses about what the word is. There's word families, which was very popular when I started teaching, and it was building on rhymes. Again, you can see how phonemic awareness would be important with that. And then there is sort of contextual phonics, where you have the word and you try and again sort of guess from the first letter and the context. For kids who have difficulty learning how to read, there's good evidence that synthetic phonics, in other words, learning letter-sound correspondences in a very systematic and explicit way, may be the preferred approach. But it's also reasonable to suggest that a variety of approaches in good combination would also be very effective. The conclusion, as suggested on this slide, is that although there are various types of systematic phonics approaches, there's not really overwhelming evidence that one approach is better than another. What is clear, though, is that it is important to provide at least some kind of explicit, systematic phonics instruction for beginning readers. And it's for that reason, then, that the Common Core State Standards and their foundational skills include phonics. And here you can see in kindergarten, it's long. They're even talking about long and short sounds, not letters, but sounds, with common spellings for the 5 major vowels. They're looking at, in first grade, decoding regularly spelled one-syllable words, know the final E rule, and in grade 2, identify words with inconsistent but common spelling sound correspondences, decode words with common prefixes and suffixes. So that's phonics. But what about bigger words? And Cunningham talks about the fact that multisyllabic words really dominate the text in upper elementary and secondary grades. She acknowledges what we've been talking about, that many of these words are related semantically through their morphology, through their origin. And what we learned from the Latin-Greek connection is that a single Latin or Greek root or affix, in other words, a morpheme, can be found in and aid in the understanding of perhaps as many as 20 words. That's more words than Nagy and Anderson thought in 1984. So it is because of that the study of morphology and morphemic analysis has gained momentum. And this gets reflected again in the Common Core State Standards, so that under the foundational skills, under phonics and word recognition, what we're looking at here is indeed letter sound correspondences, syllabication patterns, and morphology to read accurately unfamiliar multisyllabic words in and out of context. So that's, in a nutshell, what Kenneth Cunningham presents as evidence-based practices. And how do they get played out in action? Well, we've talked about this in the emergent stage, that in order to develop phonemic awareness, it's important to focus on rhymes, on alliteration, on sound substitutions, and to read to kids, in particular, having them pay attention to that final sound in a rhyme, to recognize rhymes, to identify rhymes, and to be able to generate rhymes. And then to focus on blending and segmenting. So one of the activities in Words Their Way is stretching out the names of objects in a paper bag. So being able to stretch out by syllable, pay, per, clip, or one being the syllable, recognize the syllable, and the second recognizing the individual phoneme. Another activity, which I don't believe I talked about before, but it's on page 180 in Words Their Way, is what are called Elkonin boxes, and they can be designed however you want, but the idea is that you count the sounds in a word, and as you count the sound, you move a marker. And then finally, to encourage writing using invented spelling, all ways of promoting phonemic awareness. Cunningham has a particular method which she likes to use in supporting phonics development, and that is called making words. And so she has, you can look it up, and we have some of them in the lab, the books to support this activity, but it's where kids, really you use a variety of phonics approaches, sort of a combination of synthetic phonics, where you're really paying attention to each of the sounds in the word, as well as an onset and rhyme or more analytic phonics, where you're looking at how words are alike in terms of word families. And so I thought we'd kind of take a look at this. It's an interesting approach. And in fact, I had a student one time that used making words almost exclusively as her phonics curriculum. So the one lesson that is provided in the book uses these letters, A, E, U, the vowels, and C, C, K, P, S, the consonants. You could certainly combine this with touch phonics if you're in the lab, pull those letters in order to make the following words. And the lesson goes something like this, and I'm going to read it from the book just so you get somewhat of a feel of it. So you would say, use two letters to spell the word up. I got up at 6:30. Change one letter to spell us. The fifth graders put on a play for us. Add a letter you don't hear to spell use. We use our letters to make words. Move the same letters to spell the name Sue. Do you know anyone named Sue? Change one letter to spell Q. When you are an actor, you listen for your cue. Change one letter in Q to spell cup. The baby drinks from a sippy cup. Change the vowel to spell cap. Do you ever wear a cap? Add a silent letter to change cap into cape. Batman wore a cape. Change one letter to spell cake. Do you like chocolate cake? Change one letter to spell sake. I hope for your sake that it doesn't rain during the game. Change the last two letters to spell sack. A sack is another name for a bag. Change one letter to spell pack. Pack your clothes for the sleepover. Change the last letter to spell another four-letter word, pace. The racers ran at a very fast pace. Add one letter to spell space. When we write, we leave a space between the words. I have just one word left. It is a secret word you can make with all your letters. See if you can figure it out. And that secret word is cupcake. This is making words lessons are engaging, they're hands-on, and they encourage kids and support kids in paying attention to those individual sounds in the words, as well as the orthographic patterns that represent those sounds. And then this is one way to sort words, by the number of letters in the word. Cunningham also has a series of books with making big words lessons, and this is an example of one. And you can see that the words are longer, and now all of a sudden we're paying attention to words and sorting words not by the number of letters, but rather by their morphemic components. So she suggests you teach children to use words they know, to decode and spell other words. This is taking advantage of word families or phonograms. Interestingly, 37 rhymes can be used to generate over 500 different words. It's a very productive activity to use rhyming words and how words look alike and sound alike to learn new words. And that is really in many ways sort of the underlying component of word sorts in Word Their Ways. Much as we say you need to become word conscious in vocabulary development, she's suggesting kids become word detectives. Do I know any other words that look and sound like this word? And that will help you, the look and the sound in the word's pronunciation and spelling. Are any of these look-alike, sound-alike words, which I've generated, related to one another in meaning? That's sort of kind of evidence-based practices in phonological awareness and phonics, and best practices in action in phonological awareness and phonics, some of which I really hope you connect to what we've talked about in Words Their Way. As a part of the course, I've asked that you do a little bit of writing. And this is the first writing I'd like for you to do. It's in response to this prompt. A parent asks why your instruction involves sound blending and segmenting when the goal is learning to read. Explain your rationale, citing the research literature, for including these activities in supporting beginning reading. And this is the due date is a change from what's on the syllabus. It will be due March 16th. And that's it. Thank you.